jobs. And every technology has throughout history, but it creates new ones. It creates different ones. It requires different kinds of skills to be able to do those new jobs. It's creative destruction in the economy and the skills that are valued in society. But I want to put this in context before I get into dig into the question, is that we have, right now in Ohio, the lowest unemployment rate in our history, 3.4%. And it is expected that in Ohio and every state that borders Ohio, that the size of the working age workforce will shrink, that year between 25 and 60 over the next 25, 30 years. And if you saw an article, it was in the New York Times a couple of weeks, Sundays ago, that's happening all around the developed world, in Europe and in Asia, with the exception of India. The size of the working age workforce is shrinking. It is, in some cases, already hit in Japan, and others will soon be hit in China, South Korea, and other places. And so AI can be a tool of productivity and to help do things that people previously hadn't, that we may not have the workforce to do. So we understand it's important. Now, I talked about it being a force for good, and I'm going to open this question to the entire panel. How, from your perspective, can we use it as a force for good? And some examples, if you have them, about how this tool can be used, is used in your world, and how you see it maybe used in the future for a force for good in society and in life. Who would like to start?
I can give it a go. Is it on?
It is.
Well, look, thank you for the great introduction. And we had an amazing panel before that gave a lot of really concrete examples of great use cases we're going to see from AI. I think the main thing to keep in mind is that you can replace often the word AI with the word electricity and think about the logic of the argument going forward, right? So, well, we're not an electricity company, we're a product company. We're not, an electricity company, we're a manufacturing company. Everybody uses electricity across the board. It's going to be the same thing with AI. I think we're going to see a huge amount of breakthroughs in a huge number of fields that are going to lead to amazing kind of social progress and productivity gains. The ones I'm most excited about are the ones that are going to be able to leverage just a huge amount of data that we can collect and we can now generate, combined with our ability to compute that data thanks to cloud computing and to advances in computing breakthroughs, and then AI ML solutions, including generative AI tools. And we've all played with ChatGPT and other platform solutions like that, and you can generate interesting texts, but you can also generate code, you can generate molecular formulas, so that means in the material sciences, the ability to generate entirely new ideas of types of materials in a much shorter time span than what science would have normally taken to do. And at AWS, we've partnered, for instance, with the Allen Institute to map at a cellular level the human brain, and then to be able to extrapolate from that centralized data source all types of new insights and new approaches to curing diseases that have been haunting all of us, from Parkinson's to Alzheimer's disease. So I think essentially the possibilities are limitless.
Okay. To say, so my role at KPMG is to give our consultants the tools they need to be successful. So I get early access to all of these cool things. You need to play with them. And the amount of use cases you can solve with generative AI is just overwhelming. Like, our hardest problem is we had so many things we could pick to do, we didn't know where to start. So, just some examples of things that we've seen that have been just ridiculously helpful for our teams, where we turned this on internal to our organization. We took Microsoft up on their offer, we stood up in our tenant, and now have ChatGPT inside of KPMG. We see in the 2 months that we've launched it, 500,000 different conversations of people using it, from everything from, I need to do code, I want to learn about a specific task. We had one of our leaders plan a trip to whiskey country so that we knew where to stay, or just getting gooder at English, right? All of those 500,000 conversations, we see 500,000 different use cases. And And the bill for that, which I always think is super interesting, is about $3,000. Right? We were worried that we were going to like have these huge bills from Microsoft. Sorry, Microsoft, but it's like ridiculously cheap to do the things that we've been doing. So this whole notion of turning on generative AI and giving it to people to solve just this huge array of challenges has just been mind-blowing for me.
Yeah, I can go next. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight, and everyone else here has already highlighted many of the benefits of AI. And one thing I'd like to highlight, which was brought up a little bit in the previous panel, is how this new AI that we have with generative AI, ChatGPT, and all these things, is widening the circle of people who can now participate in the technological revolution. So until now, if you wanted to participate in this, you had to know programming, you had to know a whole lot of technical stuff, maybe statistics, math, and all that. Now, you could be a philosopher, you could be an English major, you could be anyone, and everyone has creative ideas. And now we have a way to talk to technology in our natural language, and in terms of imaging, and generate things with it. So I think this is going to broaden the scope of what can be done with AI by bringing in people who are not toolies like me, okay, who are not techies, who are thinking out of the box because they're in a different box. They're not nuts. So I think that is going to be a huge impact that this is going to have. And that is going to be a force for good. I can go on about this, but I'll stop here and let John say a little bit.
Thank you. I'm at Cincinnati Children's, professor of pediatrics and psychiatry and biomedical informatics. And I also joint appointments at Oak Ridge National Lab and guest scientist at Los Alamos. And we as a team have been working on tools and putting AI into clinical care since 2003. And some of our successes and use cases have been one tool that's called GeneSight that was started at a company called AssureRx it's been used on over 2 million people. And the whole purpose of that is to try to identify the optimal neuropsychiatric drug for individuals. That was eventually sold to a company called Myriad for roughly $300 million or something along that lines. So we built that. We've developed NLP models for suicide prediction in kids and identification of early onset of suicide. And now Children's has a strategic initiative called the Pursuing Our Potential Together. And one of the 4 pillars is CURE. And so our latest project is a $10 million funded by Children's, and then some funding from the Gardner Foundation, is to do early identification of specific mental health with the idea that we'll cure it. And those specific mental health and cure include anxiety, depression, suicidality, and school violence. And the idea is that by using the clinical records, we can begin to do early identification of these diseases. Early identification is important because 30 to 40% of adult mental illness starts as a kid. And so we want to be able to identify and do early identification. And that's why we're part of the CURE Foundation. Our anxiety models are up and running, and they're being translated into care. And we're able to identify suicide or anxiety symptoms 6 months before they actually occur in the clinics. So that means that we can start care that much earlier, and we can help the kids with that. So next we'll start with depression, and then suicidality, which we have a lot of experience in, and finally school violence, which I anticipate will be the most difficult ones. So that's our use cases.
Yeah, I'm back to thinking a little bit about some of the earlier questions on the previous panel as well, as we think about the potential for good here. I mean, at the end of the day, when I think about what AI does and is, I think it's ultimately about pattern recognition and allowing us to develop opportunities for more higher order thinking, I think was the phrase that was used in the previous panel. When I think about what we do in our classrooms, for example, freeing us up to be able to explore critical thinking
as opposed to memorization. You know, you mentioned cheating, right? Like the question, if I had a nickel for every time I get asked that question. And those of us of a certain age remember when calculators came around and our teachers were telling us that was cheating, right? And as every new technology, as you pointed out, comes around, there's this kind of creative destruction and these shifts that happen. But if you really think about what they do is they take these things that we're devoting cycles to and sort of push them aside for us to allow us to be able to think more constructively and creatively about the really hard stuff, right? The problem solving more than the pattern recognition. Let the pattern recognition, you know, my car can tell me whether or not someone's veering into my lane. I can focus on sort of the more critical, sort of situational, contextual problems that I'm thinking about as I'm driving the car, right? So, I mean, the potential for good is actually that it just simply frees us up to be able to think about the things that really matter, like the example that we just heard, instead of going through a lot of things that are very rote.
Well, and that is a lot of the history of innovation in the workplace, is that we've seen this in the blue-collar sector of the economy for many, many years, the craft sector, as machines automated things, and it freed up human beings to do other types of tasks. And that is happening in other aspects of society that previously we didn't feel a lot of that until smartphones and some of these new technologies come around where change the nature of work so that human beings can do more things than only human beings can do. And that's certainly along those lines. I want to delve a little bit more into education because this is, I think, super, because that's where it's going to start. This is where we all get reskilled and upskilled and our children get launched in the right kind of way. And so Ali, I'll start with you. Anyone else can chime in on this. You know, how do we use AI as a tool for enhancing academic work rather than, we'll go with Glenn said, rather than cheating? How do we do it for the right things?
Yes.
How do we need to think about that?
Right, and I would say that we should divide that up into two parts. One is with pre-college education, and one is with education in college and graduate school. So for students in college and graduate school, I would think that I would urge all disciplines, not just the computational disciplines and the engineering disciplines and technical disciplines, to include AI. Because AI is going to be our partner for the rest of our lives, whether we like it or not. And we will either learn to treat it as a partner and a peer and someone that, or something that helps us, or we are going to see it as an impediment. So we have to make sure that the students in all disciplines are familiarized with it, understand how it works, not the technical stuff, but just logically, how does it work, and to become used to it as a partner. For pre-college students, I think it's really important to introduce, again, all students to this, and we have to be very careful because we don't want them to start depending on it. So I think one of the greatest dangers with AI is what I call cognitive substitution, or basically we outsource our cognitive tasks to AI. We've already outsourced our navigational abilities to AI essentially. So if we keep outsourcing all our cognitive abilities to AI, I don't think that's a good thing. So we have to make sure that when we introduce AI to students earlier in their educational lives, we do it in a way that enhances their cognitive skills rather than substitutes the AI skills for them, for theirs.
That's a really great point that I want to think about. How many of you used to be really good at directions? And now are not really good at directions. Okay? That's an example of how we lose some of our ability to perform the tasks that are important. And that's the question: when is the right time to introduce this to people in their academic settings? And it's really an important question. I think we're all grappling with and trying to figure out. Yeah, others chime in on that conversation.
I really, in the distinction between grad students, college students, and high school level, I do not agree more on the idea that this is going to have to be something that everybody gets literate with and understands how to leverage as a tool. An example that I love, talking about history before, or in the archaeology space, I mean, the ability now, leveraging satellite imagery to be able to detect in times of drought, telltale kind of signals of where there would have been either a castle or some sort of village or something like that, thanks to automated algorithms. Well, that came from really archaeology departments at Oxford learning to use basic AI tools, right? So it's improving their own kind of research in their own field. At the high school level, and frankly across society, I think we're in the process now of developing norms for how we go about using this technology. When we talked about the calculator, it reminded me when I was finishing high school, starting college, like the advent of kind of the internet being used more widely. And you know, you get an assignment and you would search and essentially copy paste the first website you found and said, there's my answer. And now, kind of generally people understand that's not how you go about using search, and there's clear kind of ways that you cite research and so on. I think we're going to have those types of norms develop in the next year or two. But let's remember, this is 6 months old. And then it's about learning how to do, we've talked about prompt engineering in the panel before. How many people here are familiar with what prompt engineering means? And it's not that, it's not a thought. But prompt engineering is essentially how you go about asking questions to the model in order to try to get the right types of answers back, right? So we have to learn how to do that, to do it properly. We also have to learn that the model, as one of the startups explained before, is not always going to have accurate answers. It still has problems with hallucination, where at times hallucination is a term of art, where essentially it'll just invent a solution based off of something that was really not in the underlying data set. So you have to maintain that critical eye and learn how to analyze it, which doesn't mean is an impediment to your productivity, far from it. It's just you need to learn how to actually interact with it.
Yeah, the big thing you need to be able to do, use the term prompt, right? You gotta learn to ask good questions. I mean, that is, the answers you get in life and out of your AI are as good as the questions that you ask. And that's a skill that needs to be developed. How do you ask the right questions? Who else would like to jump in?
So I think it's also important to think of the graduate students as part of the workforce. We have with our program about 40 MDs, PhDs, MD PhDs, and about 6 of those are postdocs. And PhDs come in and we work with them and everything. They're essential to getting our work done. They're essential to working together and coming up with new ideas. And I was telling Ollie earlier, they keep you on your toes. They're very smart, and things that I may have done 10 years ago, they remind me that was 10 years ago. And so it's important to include them into the equation. And we also use a distributed approach to do that. A lot of folks don't want to come to Cincinnati. And so we have a strategic partnership with Oak Ridge National Lab, where we're using their advanced computers to run our models. And the models are 10 to the 18th, and so that's 10 plus 18 zeros in order to compute that confidence worthy. And on your desktop, that would take about 10 years. But on the exascale computers at Oak Ridge, a $600 computer that we paid for as taxpayers, that can be done in a second. And so in that 1 second, we can then push it. We now have the opportunity to push this out on clinicians' desktop. But the coding on those, the work on those is predominantly done by postdocs and doctoral students and everything, because they grew up doing that. So don't underestimate the value of these students and putting them early into your lab or into your business.
Did you say 10 years?
10
10 years versus 1
second.
second. Yeah, that's faster.
And because you can do that, you can take and train models and push them all over the country. We plan on pushing them out globally. You can take them instantaneously and put them on.
We would call that an efficiency gain.
Yes.
Yeah. Glenn, do you have any insights on this as an educator?
Yeah. Back now, almost 20 years ago, I was the founder of a concept called the flipped classroom. This idea of taking the technology to sort of take the rote work of the classroom, put it out of the classroom, spend time in the classroom, actually doing the thinking, the hard part. And I think in the end, particularly in higher ed, I'm part of an early stage ed tech startup right now, exploring this. We need to think about AI as a co-pilot. I think we're going to hear that phrase co-pilot more and more and more. That is this thing that sits beside you And that even that prompt engineering kind of becomes a two-way conversation with the AI, where you're nudging it and it's nudging you and you're nudging it, so that you're able to do what you do better. And I like the co-pilot analogy, because if you think about like the complexity of flying some of like the military aircraft today, no human being could really make all those decisions quickly, but at the end of the day, the ones they need to make are the ones that you put in the hands of the pilot of these complicated jets. And it's the same thing in higher education, that there are things that we need the faculty, the things that we need a K-12 teacher to be there for, who understand the intuition of, Jane is a very visual thinker. We really need, if we're gonna have an AI tutor work with Jane, I can prompt that AI to say, hey, why don't you start doing more visual concepts and analogies for Jane, right? And that's the co-pilot relationship that I have with that AI. And so it is not a replacement as much as an enhancement. And I know that's a theme we've heard over and over again here today, but that's, I think, the real power of any tool, right? Like, if you look at the history of technology transfer and technology and innovation, it's always about a tool that levers us to be better at what we do, and that co-pilot notion in higher education and K through 12, I think is where we're going to see tech and AI make the biggest difference.
Yeah, a collaborator, a co-pilot, a tutor, it's there with us to help us become more productive and get to the right answer more swiftly.
And I'll just add, so at KPMG, we hire about 5,000 new employees every single year, right? And the people I need are the people who can use these tools to get work done for our clients, right? Who can sort of take that co-pilot mindset and figure out how to do their job better, or to take the things that are coming out and help their clients transform. I actually love the analogy of the Industrial Revolution. I've actually been talking to clients about this a lot, because I see these pre-trained generative AIs is almost like Faraday inventing a motor, right? Like when he created a motor, he was like, cool, it spins, but they had no idea to use motors for electric toothbrushes or air conditioners or name 1,000 things that have motors. We're now in this spot where I can take a pre-trained model off the shelf, and I'll have hundreds of them to choose from this time next year. I need people who can come in and be like, oh, I can use this motor to help transform my client's procurement process. I can use this motor to think differently about how we survey HR. I can use this motor for thousands of things to transform business processes for our clients. So, from the employer standpoint, I need people who are able to think creatively about where to apply this technology and how to use it for themselves and for our clients.
Okay, well, I'm supposed to wrap up, but I'm not. Because I have one more question that I need to ask for the good of the conversation in Cincinnati. Is that I've been told by many people, not experienced myself, that Montreal is doing a great job in becoming an AI research and innovation hub. And assuming that that is true, Mark, I think you know a little bit about
Feeling a little
this.
targeted.
Yes. So, tell me what is happening there and what lessons maybe for the group about how we make Cincinnati the best version of that.
Right, well, look, as my French Canadian name entails, I'm from Montreal. A couple of things went into Montreal becoming kind of an AI hub and hotspot. One of them was, frankly, 30 years ago, the government took essentially a VC, a venture cap approach to fundamental research, and where they had kind of even one researcher that was doing really interesting work, but in a field that wasn't sexy, wasn't what was happening right now, gave them $5–10 million to build a research agenda with global researchers and attract graduate students. They did that with AI in the late 80s. And so by the time we had the big breakthrough of deep learning and neural networks, essentially the top 3 researchers on Earth happened to be in Montreal or Toronto. And they also had hundreds of graduate students working under them. And so the breakthrough came, obviously, every big tech company, everybody came in wanting to hire those folks, or every jurisdiction was trying to generate more of that talent. We already had them in place. And the government took a second really good step, which is to spend essentially $500 million in consolidating that research ecosystem and making sure there was opportunities on the ground there. So that was in about 2016, 2017. Since then, instead of kind of people leaving Montreal as they normally would have to go to Silicon Valley or wherever else there would have been opportunities, they ended up staying and the labs came to Montreal instead. And so you had kind of every major tech company set up an AI/ML research hub. And then as a kind of consequence of that, You have numerous startups trying to pop up because they want to access those researchers. Many of the researchers leave and then kind of start their own thing, and it just kind of became a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you already had talent, you consolidated it, and then the final thing they did, which was really, really smart, is they made it really, really easy to retain that talent and to attract new one, in the sense that a graduate student that came out of university could have their work visa processed in under 2 weeks, same with anybody with a machine learning degree globally. They had a lot of good, smart policy decisions happen over a long period of time.
And that's what we're trying to do in Ohio in our own way. And we have a lot of great things happening in this state right now. But as I say to the team always, you never rest. You got to get up every morning and keep battling because you're chasing somebody and somebody's chasing you, right? You got to continue to get better. But the reason, the why, that we talked about, why are we doing this, is because we want to make our world a better place and contribute to healthcare solutions for children and adults and improve equality of educational opportunity, improve efficiencies in customer service and all of those fronts. That's the why we're doing this and what we can do collectively to get better. Thank these great minds.